Okay, so
Hello, welcome back to Talking Your Walk, and I have got a fascinating man today to speak with. It's a Dr. Gerald Savage. Now, Gerald has been around sound for a long time, and he actually did his master's in ethno-musicology, and he is he's a sound healer as such, but so much more than that, and we'll discover that as we talk. I really can't wait to speak to Gerald. So without further ado, I'll just pass straight over. So hello, Gerald, and thank you so much for joining me today.
good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, you're very welcome. So can I ask, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I always tell people I grew up in the water capital of the world because I don't know if you've heard about Flint, Michigan, but Flint, Michigan was a place that had a disastrous event regarding its water supply, and it affected the city unbelievably. And so that's actually where I grew up. During the time that I grew up, it was a factory town, a General Motors town specifically, and the economy was booming. It was a really great place to live economically, as well as families and people were working. And then probably around the 1990s, there's a movie actually based on Flint's story by Michael Moore. I think it's called Roger, Where's Roger, or something like that. But it really accurately tells the story of Flint and its transition from this economic base to disaster. And I think this is a part of what happened with the water supply. So that's where I grew up, in that environment, in an automotive 75 miles from Motown, from Detroit. And so it was very musical at the same time that it was a great place to grow up at the time.
Yeah. And did you play an instrument as a child? Did you get into, you know, you're saying you grew up with music, and I actually saw the film about Flint. It's on Netflix.
Yes.
But yeah, so did you play an instrument as a child?
Yes, I did. I started taking piano when I was very young, about 8 years old. The neighbors' children played piano, and I told my mother, hey, you know, that seems really cool. I want to play. And so she signed me up for lessons. And so I took lessons for a year. After that year, my teacher and I didn't have the greatest chemistry, but you know, at the same time, it was really the foundation to my musical training, my background. And probably around 4th grade, I think it was, that the music teacher who was at my elementary school invited people to, well, actually we took a test. I did really good on this music test just as an aptitude feeler to see how kids were adaptable to music. I scored very well and got an opportunity to choose my instrument. So I thought I wanted to play saxophone. Now, for some reason, all the kids wanted to play saxophone, but as it turns out, he had a trombone. and there was this trombone, and it was brand new. Still, the plastic was around the instrument. I took the instrument home. I didn't play it for maybe 1 or 2 weeks. I didn't touch it. I wouldn't even take it out of the case. And eventually I took it out of the case, and it was this magical experience that eventually led me, when I was in, I think it was my first year in high school, I actually was able to tour Europe. It was something that took me on the other side of the planet. And that really started much with me in terms of just my exposure to international culture. And of course, you know, I advanced in the trombone and eventually decided that's what I was going to major in, and continued to play piano. And I started to get into composing and arranging during that time. And all of those skills then I took on as I went to university.
Wow. And so you did your degree, and then you went on and did your master's in ethno-musicology. I had never heard of that. So what does that entail? I mean, a lot of work, obviously.
Okay, so first of all, I did my undergraduate work at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And once I finished, I did not have an education degree. And I can hear my mother's voice to this day, and she would say, just make sure that you get that certification because you always need something to fall back on. Well, eventually I ended up listening to her. So I went back to Michigan, lived in Detroit for a little while. And I was actually planning on going to LA to pursue, I was interested in film scoring. And then my place where I was gonna stay when I was in LA fell apart. So as a result of that, I had to go to plan B, which was get my certification. And then I had a mentor, Portia Maltsby is her name. She's one of the world's foremost ethnomusicologists. And she told me that I needed to continue my education beyond performance because I was more than a performer. Because that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to write, arrange, perform. And she recommended Pittsburgh would be one of the places that I should look into. So then I came to Pittsburgh to begin my work on my ethnomusicology degree. Now, specifically, what ethnomusicology is the study of music and culture. So the cultural influences, the culture that the music grew out of. And so you have programs that specialize within the program, the study of the music of Latin America, the study of various African cultures, Asian cultures, so on and so forth. So it gives you a broad view on what music has been historically as well as geographically in the world. Now, the beautiful thing also about this is because this was the foundation of my interest in sound healing, because I always knew that there was something about music and sound that was very powerful. And as I began to study more about how societies throughout the world, music is functional. You know, it serves a place, it has a place, it serves a purpose in life. And healing is a part of that. And, you know, you have, of course, the shamanistic cultures, the shamanistic traditions within cultures. You have, you know, the griot and the storyteller and music that's used throughout Africa. You have all kinds of aspects which show you that music is more than just entertainment. Out of the Western music, Western European tradition, it primarily is something that people use for entertainment. And, you know, you have the entertainer and you have the audience, and there's a divide there. You know, there's not necessarily a participation element that goes on. And so this became the foundation once again for my interest in sound healing, because I said there has to be more to music than just entertainment.
Wow. So when you've graduated, you then went on and did a doctoral degree as well.
I started, I never finished it, and I'll tell you
Didn't
more.
you finish it? So then, you know, what did you do after you finished that? Did you continue to do your composing and touring and playing, or you did?
This is really funny. Now, first of all, I'm going to say up front, one of the things that I avoided at all costs, and that was being a teacher. I did not want to teach. So I finished the degree, and I had my teacher certification, and my mother's voice you're going to hear again. So once I finished, I worked in New York. I decided to go to New York, and my wife at the time, she was into fashion design, so we both moved to New York and thought this would be our hub. Well, when I got to New York, I worked at Pratt Institute, which is a school of art design, graphic design, because when I was at the University of Pittsburgh working on my doctorate, I was working in the academic advising center, which was the administrative part of education. And so when I went to New York, I was able to get into the door by having that background. Of course, I understood once I got to New York, I was going to do music. You know, that's what I was going to do. That's what I was really there for. So while I was at Pratt Institute, Jerry Allen, who is a world-renowned jazz pianist, God bless her, she died a couple of years ago. So Jerry Allen and I, which is very interesting because she's from Detroit. I met her in Detroit. She was going to the University of Pittsburgh working on her degree in ethnomusicology, and then she moved to New York. So I was kind of following Jerry. And when I got to New York, Jerry got this opportunity. She was up and coming then, and there was an opportunity to tour Scandinavia. So Sweden, Norway, Finland. We played at the Paris Opera House. We went to Munich. And she said, would you like to do this tour? I said, well, of course I would love to do this tour. My boss at Pratt said, no, you can't take this time off. So I said, okay, that's fine. I quit. So I went to Europe for, it was a 2-week tour. And so that was my experience in New York. Of course, after I came back, I had to look for a job. And so I began my hustling phase. By this time, my son was born. And there was no way that I could see staying in New York for this long period with a son, because as you know, New York is very expensive. You have to have big money there to be able to live there comfortably, and especially to raise a family. You know, I'm from Michigan, living in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has wonderful parks. So to say the least, my wife at the time and I decided to move back to Pittsburgh. Well, at that time, I always had this saying that I'm not gonna teach, I'm not gonna do this. And so my wife said, you know what, Gerald, you have a family now, so you have to do whatever it is you need to do. So this is how I started teaching. So I went and put in my paperwork, and then I started eventually full-time subbing. And then I really built my reputation as a teacher and as a choral director, because that's another stream that I always pursued in terms of voice and arranging and vocal music. So after one thing after another, after many years, and so now I'm at the School of Arts here in Pittsburgh. It's called Pittsburgh CAPA, 6 through 12. And I'm chair of the vocal program there. And so this thing that I did not want to do regarding teaching, you know, it led me on an amazing path. So I think sometimes we resist what it is that we really want to do, or what's calling us, what we're being called to do. And this is one of the perfect examples where eventually I found my niche here and loving it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the sound healing in a minute.
It's really fascinating, isn't it, to think, you know, it took a lot of courage to quit the job and go on that tour as well, because it's not easy, I think, to give something up that offers a certain amount of security to follow your dream or your heart.
Yes. Yeah, the thing about Pratt, though, I did not mention, there was hardly any money involved, which was really, I wasn't really losing that much, because the pay was hardly anything. You know, it was, we were struggling, you know, we struggled. Not to the point where we were not able to eat or have a place to stay, but, you know, we had to watch all of our pennies. It was just like that, yeah.
Wow. And then you've landed in Pittsburgh. You're doing your teaching that you didn't want to do. And what got you into sound healing? What was the next stage of your journey? Okay,
this ties into everything that I was talking about before. When I was working on my doctorate, one of the biggest problems that I had was I finished the coursework, but trying to get a dissertation topic that was really going to be something I had a passion about, I was going to be interested in. And one of the things that I was slowly over the years, even when I was in ethnomusicology, I was doing a lot of studying about music and sound as healing modalities. And so when I was deciding on a dissertation topic and I was preparing for that, I was doing a lot of research and wanted to do a dissertation along those lines, but I just couldn't get myself motivated to do it. You know, the academic world is one thing. Doing it on your own is an entirely different thing. So on my own, if I could just do it my way, it would be great. But just to go through that whole, you know, the research and the statistics and all of that was just a bit much for me. But I continued to do my studying. I continued to grow in that respect. And then which eventually led me to Globe Institute of Sound and Consciousness, which is in San Francisco. And I decided that I was going to sign up for the certificate program. And when I got into that, wow, just like so many other people, once you really delve deeply into that, beyond your own work in terms of what I was doing on my own, and of course I studied yoga and I would do mantras and this kind of thing, and I would become more interested in ragas and some of the other healing modalities you find in other cultures. and eventually going into this program, I finished the program, and the gentleman who runs the program asked me if I wanted to teach a course. And that's how I ended up doing that. So now I teach an online course with Globe Institute of Sound and Consciousness. And the course that I teach is called Applied Music Theory, which when you study music as a performer, of course, you know, you need to know the technique of an instrument, the technique of your voice, so on and so forth. You have literature that you study. But when you study music theory, it's not generally something that people really like to do. I mean, people don't just fall over heads over heels unless you're a composer, and it gives you the insight on how different tools of elements that you can use in your composing. But now this class looks at those elements, whether it is the dynamics, whether it's the speed, dynamics meaning how loud or soft the music is, the speed of the music, pitch versus frequency, because you do have cases where you have an A, but everybody knows the standard is A440, but then there are people who say that was a political decision, and 432, for instance, is more auspicious. So you have timbre, which is based on the overtone. Overtone is what I call the DNA of sound, which everybody's voice, every instrument, anything that creates a frequency has exactly the same pattern. So these are things that you don't get taught in music school. So even people who take my class who have studied music formally and are accomplished musicians or singers are fascinated that when you approach it from the standpoint of healing and frequency and vibration, you see an entirely different universe than you used to. So this is a big part of what I do, is taking the elements just like you would in chemistry, and this is why SoundPill is frequency, sound, and music, because it's a pharmacology of those things, meaning that you have to be very careful about how you approach individuals when you're doing the sound healing work. Now, you were talking, for instance, about things such as gong baths, or people do singing things with singing bowls or crystal bowls, and oftentimes there's no basis from which that people will approach a client about what to do and how to do it, what's good, what's not good, how much of something is good, how less of something is not good. So this is a big part of what it is that I've learned to do in this area of sound healing, which makes my practice SoundPill very unique. And that's SoundPill.net, and in case someone knows, www.soundpill.net, not .org or .com. But you'll see that a big part of what I do is that I really put forward the idea that I don't want to ever work with someone and cause harm because I don't know what's going on with them. And so this is the big part. I have an assessment tool that I work with. So this is a big part of what I do with both my class at Globe Institute as well as with individual clients.
And SoundPill.net, your website, you've got some music playing as soon as you go on to that.
Yes.
And then you've got some of the somatics, shapes and that as well. What is it that you love about sound healing? What is it that really grips you with sound healing?
Well, it's the fact that sound and music are everywhere in our life. We're made of sound and music. Our heartbeat, or the way that we walk, the tone of our voice, the manner in which we speak, whether that is flowing or whether it's sharp and fast, whatever it is, the way that we do everything in life reflects the fact that we're made up of vibration, frequencies, and that music is pervasive in every aspect of our life. You can't escape that. It's just a matter of using that energy consciously. And that's it's your intent, first of all. And then, even if you look at a person who is a performer, and you can have performers do exactly the same song. I'm talking like a vocal soloist. And that same song will be received totally different, depending on the individual's intent, where their heart is, what they are communicating, you know, as opposed to, and all of these things you can, this is a big part of being a performer, is because you're exposed. People see who you exactly are. Your soul is out there for everybody to see. So this is something that's very important. So my passion is to help people to, first of all, be empowered to use sound and music in a way that perhaps they have not been aware of or familiar with. And then the other thing is to, once you have actually empowered yourself, then you can utilize that for health and well-being.
Yeah, and have you found the interest in sound healing growing in the US as it has in the UK? Is it growing to the same extent in the US?
You know, it depends on the pockets of where you are in the United States. So for instance, if you're out in the Southwest, you know, even the West Coast, you have, like I said, Globe Institute is actually in San Francisco. So you have a hub of people who are very, very interested and open to natural healing and sound being a part of that. You'll find places like New Mexico, Arizona, and even places such as Utah, where people are very, very much engaged in this type of practice, both as practitioners as well as people who are seeking out alternatives to stress and anxiety in their life. So yes, there is a big boom. And I guess I also should mention that you find this on the East Coast as well. Here in Pittsburgh, you have a small community, and that's okay, because I think this is a part of the healing work, is making sure you bring whatever it is you bring to where you are and being present there. So there might not be the same extent of a community here as you might find on the East or West Coast, but at the same time, that provides an enormous opportunity. And of course, the big thing about it is that now with the online approaches to this, and particularly my practice during this COVID time, provides great opportunities to do this work virtually, you know, and this gives the same, and in fact, I'll share about the assessment tool that I use. And you'll find that using an assessment tool that is valid and reliable is a great thing that you can do online as well as in person.
Wow. And your assessment tool, can you describe what that does?
Yes, the assessment tool that I use is called Voice Bio, and it's also called Voice Analysis Harmony, both of those names. But essentially what Voice Bio is, it's a computer-based program that assesses the energetic makeup of individuals using a microphone, answering 3 basic questions that usually take about 3 minutes. It's very, very easy to do. It's non-invasive, so that people who are looking for what's going on with them energetically without having to take blood or urine samples or that kind of thing, and that you would find in traditional medicine. And I do want to mention, of course, that I'm not a physician or anything like that. But after taking that assessment and getting that data, then we analyze what's going on energetically with the individual. And it's done in a very unique way, so that frequencies are broken up in the voice that we are not aware of. So with this program, you can actually have a gong, for instance. I guess I should say a crystal ball. So you could tone a crystal ball, and when you put the mic to that crystal ball, it will only show one frequency for that crystal ball. You do the same thing with a tuning fork, it would just show one frequency. And it would show, you know, what the hertz are, you know, the vibration, the frequency. But when you speak, it breaks up all of these frequencies that are in voice, because we don't realize that we have multiple frequencies that we're emitting all the time. And so this program breaks those frequencies up that correspond to specific areas of the body. And so people who, for instance, are into the chakra system, you know, whether you're talking the Vedic chakra system, or you're talking about the chakra system on a Tibetan base, sometimes with this program, what it shows is that one frequency, let's say the pitch D, will have multiple places that is present in the body. And that's a very important thing, because it's not just this neat package that you will find at the 7 chakras, or, you know, in some of the Tibetan is 5. There's more to it than that. And so, you know what, actually I have a little board here. Tell me if you can see it okay. So these are examples of the voice. Can you see okay?
Yeah.
You probably can't hear me very well, but you will see that these are the bar graphs that the voice print will make. And each one of these is based on, if you're familiar with music at all, the chromatic scale. So those of you who don't know what a chromatic scale is, it's 12 different pitches that are half step apart. So it's the black and white keys, if you will. And of course, the black and white keys actually repeat over the course of a keyboard, whether it's, you know, the low range or the high range. And then actually it extends beyond the low notes that you can actually hear, and beyond the higher notes that you can actually hear. So it's a cycle. So this program will take that chromatic scale, whether it's C, C sharp, and so forth, and then it will give you a voice print that shows those bars. Some of them are high, some of them are low, and some of them are non-existent, which is something that needs to be addressed in terms of whether there's energy coming through or not. And it's been pretty amazing working with individuals who work with this, and they say, well, how did you know that? This is bizarre, you know, how is it that through sound, how is it through the voice that you can get all of that information? So this is basically what happens. And then after we have the data and we analyze the data, then we try to get the lowest frequencies to start to energize, if you will, to bring out homeostasis, some balance. So if a bar, for instance, and this is, by the way, if people want to look more into this, there is a video, actually it's a PowerPoint video that I have on my website that they can find out what the entire process is, what it looks like, also in terms of case studies, because I have a few case studies there. And then I go through to show exactly this process that I'm talking about. And so usually when you have bars that are very, very high, that usually indicates some type of inflammation, some type of congestion in terms of the energy, infections, whatever the case may be. And then what you can do, and this is where it goes back to my work at Globe Institute. And this is why it helps to know something about music, because there are certain corresponding frequencies, bars on the voice print that work together. So if in fact you have, and usually the system is such that if a person has a very low frequency, the high frequency oftentimes will correspond with that. And guess what? The way that you bring down that high frequency is by bringing up more of that lower one. And there are different practices that you can use in doing so. Now I have something called the SoundPill process, and that is the assessment, you know, the voice print, the assessment, and then going on with the recommendations. And the recommendations from a sound standpoint can involve the voice. Now the voice, of course, can include things like humming, singing, mantras, things of that toning of that nature. In fact, there is a toning program that I give to people as a part of their 2 lowest frequencies, so they can begin to work on those, which is amazing, because as you do that more and more, you will begin to see that the issues that you had on that lowest frequency will begin to mobilize, you know, and actually balance out, I guess I should say. And so that's one part of the SoundPill process. The next part of it, meaning that the pills of SoundPill. So you have the voice and toning and the breath, also breath work. And then the next one would be instruments that you can use. Now, this is where we go back to what's called the overtone series, which I call the DNA of sound. Is that then you can work with instruments that correspond with the actual overtone that actually is something that you need. So for instance, if you need to break up energy, there are certain overtones that are going to be the odd numbers, for instance, which is for energizing. And then you have the even overtones, which are more for calming. So instruments that correspond to whatever the need is can be very, very helpful. And the third part of the pills is that you can use sound and light machines, which of course is a way of entraining the brain to certain brainwave states. That's more of electronic. You can do without the sound, without the light rather, and just work with sound. In that case, you have programs that use binaural beats. Now, binaural beats, you know, there's one frequency in one ear. You do this with headphones. There's another frequency in the other ear that's slightly different. And there's a wobbling that takes place in which the brain will entrain the third tone, which is the tone that you want to achieve in terms of entraining the brain to a certain brainwave state. So that's the third. So once again, there are the three different approaches, sound and music only, in the SoundPill process, which is the voice and breath, the instruments, and then the electronic approaches such as sound and light machines, binaural beats, hemisynchronization, hemispheric synchronization, which the spheres of the brain you're synchronizing. And then there are other natural ways that you can approach it, so that once we actually go through the voice bio process and we look at that voice print, there are things such as lifestyle changes, diet, foods to include in your diet, juices that juice combinations that you can drink. There's the toning program that I told you about, that's called ear food. There's also stones you can wear, colors you can look at. There are flower essences, all of these things, essential oils. All of these things are a part of recommendations. And actually, this is something that I am very open to, and that is working with practitioners, such as people who work with essential oils, or people who work in homeopathy, or people who work with stones or color therapy, or whatever it may be, because these are recommendations that are in this program, a part of what it is that a client gets when they actually go through this process. And it would be wonderful because there are a lot of practitioners, as you know, who don't necessarily have an assessment tool. They don't have a tool that gives them a clear picture of what's going on. So it's through anecdotal information, question and answers that people might give that is pretty much it. But this gives you a more, once again, valid and reliable assessment tool. So, you know, say for instance, a person is working in one of those areas, that they could come to me, they could have one of their clients getting the assessment, and then they know more closely what they're working with.
Okay, that's interesting, because as you say, you know, a lot of therapists are just relying on a question and answer, and also the client's honesty in answering those questions as well, isn't it? And using this assessment tool means that they can't really lie, because the voice will say everything.
That's truth. Yes, so you get it. Yes, wonderful. This is exactly right. And actually, there's one of the questions that I asked with the original voice assessment that a person can easily say what feels good and they want to believe. But when you look at the brain pattern that's going along with that, it's not at all what they're saying. So say, for instance, a person will say, you know, I want to live to this ripe old age, and I want to travel here and there, and I want to be very healthy. And in the back of the mind, they're thinking, well, you know what? My mom had these issues when she was around my age. My father died. I just wonder if that's really going to happen to me as well. So it's just what you're saying. You can say one thing, and of course we do say what either we want to hear or what we want others to believe about us. But
absolutely, and you know, and when people do not give the truth an assessment, then they never really get the right treatment. So whatever they've came for will continue and continue until such times as they either tell the truth or have an assessment like that, and then you can see what's going on as well.
This is very true. A quick story. I spoke at the International Sound Healing Conference 2018, and I had a table in which people could come and get a voice assessment. And there's a lady who came. I'll never forget this because she came, had the assessment. Right before she came, she bought a crystal bowl. And the crystal bowl that she bought was for the frequency G. Doing her voice print, G was the highest frequency in her voice print, almost off the chart. Now, why did she choose G? Probably because that was a familiar frequency that she was used to. Should she work with G? No. In fact, that would have been the worst thing she could have done because that was already off the chart. And I explained this to her and I went over her voice print and I said, what I would like for you to do is to go back and get a D, D as in dog, because that was her lowest frequency. And so it's exactly what you're saying, that if you just simply have a one-size-fits-all approach, you can cause harm. You really can. I know someone else who was at I think it was a gong bath, and this person had lots of anxiety and did not want to say anything because then she felt that she was going to be the object of everyone saying, what's wrong with her? Why isn't she getting this, you know? And so she just sat through it. So there are certain things, even in group practices, you know, mantra is a good thing that you can do in a group, but there's some things that just don't work for some people. And this is why, even more so, you need to know who it is you're working with, both on a personal level as well as an energetic level.
I think it's amazing what you've done and what you're doing. So if I was a practitioner and looking at, you know, the website, you offer the courses online now, all the courses are online?
Okay, so now I teach as a part of the certification program, Sound Healing Certification Program at Globe Institute of Sound and Consciousness. They have an entire program that people can take different classes. I work with individuals one-on-one regarding if they're interested or if they're interested in learning about music theory from the standpoint of healing. And so I set that out with people so that I work with them one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're saying with the, have you got an app? You know, if I wanted to download or have my voice studied, you know, how would I do that? Do I come to you? Do you just, how does that work?
Oh, very good question. This works remotely as well as it does in person. And we can do that one of two ways, through the computer speakers that I have, or you can do that through your telephone. Either way, the voice print is very accurate, as valid as you would have it in person. And that's the beauty during this COVID time of a practice like this, that people are able to continue this work, get what they need, and not necessarily have to be in person, and not even need to be in the same city, state, or country. You can be anywhere on the planet and it will still give you exactly what you need in an accurate way. And
if someone studies with the Institute and then wanted to use, do you allow people to use what you've developed?
Yes, there is that people can become practitioners. Mm-hmm. They have to sign up for that particular like classes. The woman who actually designed it is not directly affiliated with Globe. She actually is independent, but she helps people because she designed the program. So Kay Lou Thompson is her name. So that people then will be trained by her, and that's how people are able to do it as well, yes.
Wow, I just find it fascinating, you know, and I've always loved sort of sound and sound healing as well, because as you say, the opportunities for people to heal are just phenomenal, really. And you know, if you get a really good sound healer who knows what they're doing, it's a real gift.
Yeah, you know what's amazing? It's so simple. You know, this is the thing that people don't understand. It's so simple. The breath itself is a sonic event. It's a sound event. Every time you breathe, it's a white noise that you generate through your entire body. You know, when you think of a song that you love, you actually sing that song internally. And remember, the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and fantasy, so it has exactly the same effects. You can chant inwardly, you can pray, you can, you know, these all prayers are a type of mantras, you know, the Lord's Prayer, or whether you're doing your holy rosaries or whatever. These are things that are universal. And the only thing that keeps it from being as healing is when we don't use it consciously. You know, and this goes with our thoughts, this goes with our emotions, this goes with all of that, you know, and we have mantras in our head, and they are not necessarily good mantras. You know, they could be, oh, I'll never do anything, I'll never be anybody, I'll never do this, you know, why am I wasting my time? Oh, I hate that person, I can't believe he or she's in it, oh God, I can't wait. You know, we're saying these chants, and we're having an impact. And of course, the universe doesn't know, you know, this is a universal law, so it's going to have its effect, whether you do it consciously or not. So a big part of what I do is, number one, helping people to be empowered using sound and music, to incorporate that into every aspect of their life. And, you know, the other thing is, of course, to get where you're focused on actually to the point where you see what you're doing when you're utilizing these tools, which of course is a part of the empowerment.
Okay. Well, I can only say it's been an absolute pleasure, Gerald, speaking to you and learning about your journey. And do you get much opportunity to play now? Do you still do touring and composing?
I still compose. In fact, you talk about the music on my website. Yeah. All of that music is music that I compose. And also then I'm playing and I also compose the music. And they're just clips and they're just really a small part of my writing, because I just needed to have something that was nice and calming and introduces and welcomes people to my website. Yes, so all of that. But I do want to offer anybody who listens to your program, watches the YouTube videos, I will give you a 50% discount on my regular fees. If people come, there is a part on the page where they actually can sign up. They can email me and contact me, and then we can talk about that. I recommend an hour in the beginning, because we can do a thorough assessment and I can spend time with individuals. But if people want to just do a half hour, you know, that will give us the basics. The most important thing is I want people to experience what this is about, the miracle that they will experience through the accuracy of what it is that I do with this program. And then, you know, we can continue from there, but at least to give people an opportunity to experience.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'll add that as well. And, you know, to the blurb that I put on the YouTube. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, and for sharing your journey. It's just been amazing.
Thank you very much. And once again, www.soundpill.net.
Yeah, and I'll add that as well.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate this so much.
You're very welcome.